From sunny Austin, Texas, it's the Counselor Dynamite View, coming at you.
Hello and welcome to the Counselor Dynamite View, based out of Austin, Texas. My name is Star Burgess, and joining me are my co-hosts, Crystal Kell and Jenna Fleming. We are so happy that you're joining us for this month's show. Our topic for this month is all about anxiety. So we're going to first define what anxiety is. It is the state of apprehension, uncertainty, and fear from the anticipation of a realistic or fantasized event or situation. And I also want to kind of distinguish between normal anxiety and excessive anxiety. And so normal anxiety would be about kind of, for example, nervous about taking a test or if you're giving a speech. And then we have the excessive anxiety, which is kind of that sense of doom or something bad is going to happen. Is there anything else that y'all want to add about anxiety?
Going along with the latter of what you just said, I think that it's important that you know that some anxiety is good. Mm-hmm. It can help you, it can drive you, it can be a drive for you. Sometimes I think we think anxiety is bad totally across the board, but a little bit of anxiety is good.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say those are good kind of clinical sounding words to describe what I understand to be as anxiety. And just a general rule of thumb when I'm speaking with kids and with teachers and parents, a lot of times I'll say, well, how is this greatly affecting your life? Is this something that's short term, or has this been going on and you can't sleep, you can't eat, and those types of things?
Excellent. I found some research, or I did some research on anxiety and found some interesting information. One of the things that I liked about looking at just generalized anxiety, because there's different types, and we'll get into that a little bit later, was I found an article that talked a lot about with pediatrics, so with your young friends. So this is where our elementary friends get included with it, because a lot of times they're not included in these studies. Mm-hmm. But it talked about 2.9 to 4.6% of children in the United States will deal with anxiety. And talking about more than just that mild anxiety, but talking about like they have extreme anxiety. Mm-hmm. One of the things I thought was really interesting is males and females when they're really young is consistent. It's the same. There's not really a distinguish between. But when you start getting into adolescence, so you're looking at middle school, high school age, and older, you're going to see a lot more females that are experiencing this than males. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. And so as children get older, a general rule of thumb is 1 out of 6 will have an anxiety disorder. And looking at all the anxieties, not just with your generalized anxiety disorder, but looking at all different types of anxiety.
Wow, those are some really good statistics. Thank you so much for sharing that. So when we start talking about the different types of anxiety, we really are going to talk about six different types. Mm-hmm. One being the separation anxiety, where we see the children who are having significant distress if they have to part from their parent or caregiver or even their home sometimes. Then we have what we call the panic disorder, and that's when they have this intense fear, and so then they might experience things like chest pains, rapid heartbeat, even some difficulty in breathing. Another type of anxiety is that generalized anxiety, where that's just that excessive worrying, and it's unwarranted. Like there's no reason for it, but they just are worry. And then we have the OCD, which is the obsessive compulsive disorder, where there's that repetitiveness in their thoughts and their actions. We also have the social anxiety, and I don't know if y'all have noticed that a lot with the smaller children or children in elementary, but it's social anxiety, where they just have nervousness about being around other kids. And then that last one is that post-traumatic disorder, and this normally occurs after an extremely threatening or frightening experience. And so when we start talking about anxieties in the school system, what are some common types of anxiety that you all see?
Well, I would say each one of these different distinguished anxiety issues are their own rabbit holes. I think that they can go pretty deep. And in the school setting, what I mostly see is mild forms of anxiety that almost every child and teacher is experiencing, usually around the first day of school or around testing times, and that's pretty normal. But then aside from that, what maybe is not quite as prevalent, but it's something that I tend to see just about every year that I've been in the schools, is that anxiety that lasts a little bit longer, that generalized anxiety. And where they're really, it goes beyond the first day of school and the first week of school, and it goes into, maybe the first few months of school of not wanting to go to school or can't sleep, or the child's eating habits are changing, or they're crying for no apparent reason. And that's when really, of course, it is not expected. It's not normal. And that's where really we need to step in and see what we can do to give this child some help.
I would agree. I would say that usually the most you see is your generalized anxiety, which is GAD for short. And but I will say that you every so often we'll have a child who's with the social, which would sometimes will manifest like as a selective mutism. That's definitely something that I've seen throughout working and stuff, and every so often you'll see that one, as well as maybe a little bit of the panic about different situations or different things, where you'll have a kid just kind of begin to, I can't breathe, I can't, and just helping them to calm back down and refocus again. And usually that's a specific situation that's setting that, that's a trigger for them. So, but every so often those are two that I definitely will say creep up, that you're kind of like, okay.
And I think when I see clients in private practice who are the adolescent to teens, I see more of that PTSD, where there's something that's happened that they personally experienced that's very traumatic, but it's normally within the context of the family home. Also, if they've been in a situation where they've been bullied, and depending on the degree to which the bullying has occurred, whether they've seen it or they have experienced it personally, there's also some anxiety there. And I might also add just what they see on TV. I don't know if y'all have seen that in schools, but kind of if they watch the news or they look on the computer or just wherever they get their news from, it's kind of that fear of when they were having things that were happening in the schools where gunmen were coming into schools. I know a lot of children had that anxiety about, am I going to be safe? And so I'm not sure if y'all have had that too, if you've heard that, but I definitely hear that when I'm working in practice.
Definitely. Anytime there's a large trauma like that, you'll have some kids. And I'm not for sure that it manifests outside of that normal all the time. I think some of it is very much normal. What if that happened here? And just they need reassurance that we have a plan, things will be okay. But every so often it becomes more than that. It can become more intense. It reminds me of when I was teaching and 9/11 happened. And some of my kids had seen that, and then that fear of, and for some of those kids it became a constant worry. So I think, that definitely does.
I agree, when it doesn't go away.
So when we're talking about, causes of anxiety, what do y'all see in terms of causes of anxiety? I know we talk about home life sometimes. We may not know how to manage our emotions. We can get a little bit of anxious, but sometimes it's learned, depending on where they come from.
Well, I think that, again, there are so many different causes, and some of them could be biological. Truly, anxiety, it's a matter of different hormones, secretions in your body, making your body feel jittery or butterflies or my pulse is racing. And so really and truly it could be biological, and that's why I always recommend that parents stay in contact and communication with their pediatrician, their mental health professional, or whoever it is that they're seeing professionally, to stay in touch with those changes in behavior. But then there are some other factors, like what's happening in current events. That is a factor. What's happening in their life. For instance, a test coming up, or a bullying situation, or being left out at recess or at lunchtime, and those types of issues, peer issues, can also create anxiety.
And also the home life.
Definitely.
When we talk about home life,
Absolutely.
it's a lot of times kids come in, and I think sometimes parents, we're so busy these days, this generation where mom and dads are working, and there could be anxiety because a lot of times, anxiety sometimes is from kids feeling out of control, or their world is out of control. And so I see that a lot as well.
And kids, I will say this, kids pick up a lot. And it's funny to me because I'll have some parents who they're picking up those cues, something's going on, something's happening, and I'll get a call, hey, I'm really worried about, Helga, and, she's, I think it's because she's worried about stars, she's worried because somebody won't play with her or whatever, and after spending time with her, Helga, or whoever the child is, it really is because they've overheard something, and to them, they've made it a huge, scary situation. And, just kind of helping them to normalize and communicating with the parent. So I think that's important, too, that parents understand that sometimes those little, they hear and they see and they sense a lot. And that can really be something that they worry about because the unknown is scary. Yeah.
And sometimes, parents may not intentionally do this, but sometimes parents use their children as their friends. And they shower them with their own worries or issues. And kids, depending on their age, can really only developmentally understand so much. But they're curious. Kids are very, very curious. And so an engaging conversation with their parent is giving them attention, and they're being filled in on something that's very interesting. So I would advise parents not to share personal adult topics with them if you're having difficulties getting along with your spouse, if there are financial difficulties. I am a big believer that we need to be honest with our children in an age-appropriate way. And so sometimes just watching what we're sharing and if that there can be any monitoring of what the kids are exposed to, we know they're going to overhear quite a bit. But that's also, I think, important for parents.
I think that's good that we talk about what to do with parents. What do we do with teachers? And they have, they have a big responsibility when they have 23, 25 children, and they may have a child or two or three that may be experiencing anxiety. So how do y'all help your teachers at schools?
I think the first thing is to educate. I think majority of people who are in the profession that we're in, working with children, do it because they love kids. And I think when you educate and you let them know that, hey, this is what's going on and this is what this is, that can pull at that empathy for that teacher. And I think that goes a long, long way, because I think sometimes when you're in that situation and you have a child who's falling apart at the door, you begin to take it personally, which then becomes a defensive situation, and that's never helpful. And so I think just educating, I think, is the number one thing. At least that's where I always try to come from whenever I'm dealing with that in school.
So educating staff on what anxiety is and some options for how we help our children to navigate when they have those feelings.
And recognizing it. And
Yes.
I think that's important too, them understanding. And if a parent has talked with a teacher about it, letting them know this is a real thing that kids deal with, and this is a real thing. This isn't imaginary. This isn't an excuse. This is legit, and
it's real to them.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely. I think perception is reality. I absolutely agree. The education and empathy is extremely important, and with that, understanding that anxiety is fear of the unknown, creating as many knowns as possible, meaning keeping with as much structure as you can in the classroom. With kids that are very high anxiety, as a teacher, I would make them my helpers with the calendar, because the calendar was what told us what the future held for us when we were having assemblies or changes in our schedule or when tests were coming up. And so I would give them that sense of control. It's giving kids that control over something can really help ease the anxiety, keeping the consistency. And then also with parents and teachers, having a calm demeanor ourselves and a reassuring voice and using those reassuring words that everything's okay. I have it handled. When we project to our young ones that we don't know what we're doing, they see that, and that's only going to create more and more anxiety. And so I think as many knowns that you can, give it to those kids and empower them with that.
I think that's what we use too. When I see not only clients in practice, but what Clyde and I also do with our daughter, creating those knowns in home, because sometimes the parents don't come in from the perspective of the school. They come in from the perspective of what do I do at home if my child is suffering from anxiety. And so we do talk about consistency and structure, giving them the tools, setting up, talking to them about situational kind of things that happen that they can then go back and you present something to them and they, like a scenario, and then you help them kind of work through. Okay, so we're in this situation. What can we do? Things like, again, from my perspective, breathing, which is so important. But it's not just, regular breathing. There is really, real breathing that we have to do.
Yes.
We talk about things that can cause anxiety, like what they call the CATs, which is caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, sweeteners, sugars. So when I start talking to parents about what is your child's intake like of those items. They may not do the tobacco, which we're hoping they're not, but there may be some intake of caffeine because you see a lot of kids in Starbucks these days, and they're not always getting the decaffeinated coffees. When we start talking about the diet, what kind of lunches are you sending to school? What kind of things do you allow them to snack on when they get home? Are they filled with processed sugars and sweeteners? Those things can add some impact. Now, they should not be drinking alcohol. And so, I usually take alcohol and tobacco off the table unless they're in high school, and I do ask. I do ask the question. But really checking in with parents mostly about tobacco, the sweetness, and the sugars. So important.
And I think that's it, because the way we physically take care of our bodies completely changes the game. Even not getting enough rest can make our nervous system go haywire. And that's really what we experience when we're feeling that anxious panic attack moment. It's our nervous system going haywire. And so absolutely, I actually call it yoga breathing at school, and I teach it as a school counselor to our kids. It's one of my first lessons because I utilize that tool all year long because it can help in so many ways. It can help manage anger outbursts, but ultimately it's a great tool that kids can use to help manage their anxiety, teaching them to slow their breath. Take a deep breath in your nose, down to your belly button. I tell them to imagine like a big balloon. And do that, blow it out your mouth at the same pace, and do that as many times as you need to until you feel calm. And that is really an empowering tool that kids can have. Okay, I have something I can do.
Because even if they can't, for example, take a break and get a quick drink of water, they can manage their breathing.
Everyone can breathe.
Yes. The other thing that I also talk to kids about is preparation. So, for example, if we're getting anxious or nervous about a test, we prepare ourselves in advance. And so it's just another one of the coping tools that we can not only teach our kids, but also parents. Also, and this is something that's big, parents don't like to hear this all the time, and I'm guilty of it, but we're modeling for our children. We are constant models for our children with how we deal with different situations. So if I'm nervous or if I'm not getting enough rest, and my daughter Lillian is seeing that, then she may think it's okay if I only get 4 hours of sleep. My mom does it. Or if I'm eating those things that don't necessarily should be a healthy part of my diet,
I love
that. She's going to be.
That is powerful on so many levels. And I've noticed sometimes we can label ourselves, our children, and our kids can label themselves too as, well, I'm anxious, or I worry a lot, or I'm not good at taking tests. And we tell ourselves these stories about ourselves. Well, what we're doing is we're predicting our future. If we predict our future differently, we can have a different outcome. And so one thing I also do in working with kids is I give them replacement statements. I'm calm. I can do great. I can do my best. Everyone can do their best. I can prepare for the test. I can have a great day. I can breathe. Whatever it is, it might be something small, but giving them a replacement statement. And we may not realize that we're actually feeding ourselves and kids these messages that are really ineffective and just perpetuate the issue of those anxious feelings.
And it also perpetuates the positive self-talk that happens when you can use the replacement statements. It perpetuates that positive self-talk instead of the negative, which is, I'm going to fail that test.
Exactly.
Or I'm going to forget my speech. Or just whatever that is.
I am smarter than the test.
That's right.
That's a good one.
So you want that positive self-talk.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we have to teach our children how to do that because I don't think they know how.
Sometimes we inadvertently teach them the
other.
patterns we don't want them to take on. But I also wanted to share that, sometimes anxiety looks like a panic attack at the classroom door or sleepless nights, and sometimes it can look different than that. My experience has been that the majority of kids kind of shut down and they seem a little bit shy or withdrawn. But I've also experienced personally kids that have had kind of outrageous behaviors, silly, inappropriate behaviors. I don't know if you've seen that too with kids where it's just extreme inappropriateness and it's really just a different way that their anxiety or their social anxiety is manifesting. But that can be frustrating because it looks like naughty behavior.
When children come to me, they a lot of times want to know what can I do? And I think that goes right into kind of, okay, so how do I cope with this as a child? And I think the coping is different when they're younger than probably when they're older, I would assume. I think you can't teach a kindergartner to cope in the same manner that you would like a 4th or 5th grader. And so I know that the breathing can be universal to all kids because all kids understand about the deep breathing, visualization, visualizing that good things are going to happen. What kind of things would y'all do differently, though, for an older kid than you would do for a younger?
I think that utilizing, and I call them happy thoughts with those positive things, I think that's a great starting point for your older kids, as well as helping them to rewrite those scripts, those negative things. And that's one of my favorite things to do with the older ones because it's not as hard to do, and it helps them reframe things a little bit, which gives them power. And when we have power, we start to feel more confident. And so that's one of my favorite techniques to use with my older friends. You can do that with your younger ones, but I feel like kind of starting easy with the older ones, even though they're capable of handling more, helps them too, because it simplifies it.
Do they journal?
You can use that with some of them
I do
as
have
well.
my older kids journal.
Yeah.
In fact, I give them a journal. They come in and they talk about it as a way of another form of expression. If you're anxious about something, you can write about it.
Yeah.
And I tell them you can write a story about it. You can write your story about it. You can write a song. You can write a poem, whatever it is, whichever way you choose.
Creative outlet.
If you want to draw something.
Exactly. And I was going to say, even with your little ones, they can draw in their journals. But journaling definitely is a great technique. I like journaling because they can go back and look. And I also like to challenge them sometimes if they're willing to share their journals with, how could you change your picture? How could you make this different?
That's a really great
a fun,
addition. Yeah.
way for them. It gives them, once again, that power over the situation.
Well, a yucky feeling, whether you're 5 years old or 15 years old, is it's difficult to manage. And so I think journaling is a great way. Any way that I can bring that feeling a little bit more tangible for the kids, and really adults too, it's very, very helpful. And so whether it's naming it, let's put some words to that, let's talk about it and get it out, or let's put it in a journal, let's draw it, let's use some Play-Doh and build it. Whatever we can do to pull it out, that can really help. And then also giving kids a little toolbox that they can have with them. It might be breathing, it might be a little worry stone with the little ones, and the big ones too, sometimes like having a little something that they can just pretend like they're putting all their worries in. And then also physical activity.
Yes.
We build up that energy within us, and it's got to be released. And so if your child isn't physically active and they're having a lot of anxiety, I would highly recommend engaging them in more physical activity along with watching the tobacco and alcohol
That we hope they're not doing.
sugar and all of that.
Well,
So,
it releases those happy endorphins.
Absolutely.
And that's, as an adult, that's what your doctors will tell you. You need to be physical, you need to be active. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
It's all really good information. If we had to have some highlights that we want our viewers to take away today, what would they be?
I would say just listening. Just listen to what your child has to say, and let them talk it out. ask what would happen. You know, if that did happen, what could we do? You know, empower them. It's okay to let them express their fears. You don't have to say, oh no, don't worry about that. That's an adult thing. Let them talk about it. Be there with them in the moment and help them process through it. What would we do if that happened? What's our plan of action? How do we, what are we going to do? Because that gives them, once again, it's that power piece. You're empowering them to look at things and giving them control over that anxiety. And I think it's really important.
I would say giving them as much of what you can predict in the future as you can. Keeping schedules, calendars, and allowing those tools to be a part of what they can control. Keeping an eye on what physically is going into their body and what physical activity is coming out of their body, because all of that makes such a huge difference. Even paying attention to sleep cycles is really key.
Things I like to do, you know, all about the team. And so I always like for, first of all, the parents to, if they're concerned, to take their child to their physician and get your child assessed. And that way then you really have a good picture of what their world may be like. And then also your team. When you go to the school, talking to your counselor, your teacher, your administrators, so that you all have a proactive plan for the child to create some comfort, some consistency and structure for them. I think also getting counseling outside of the school, because we know the school counselor, they get counseling for very short periods of time and it may not be true counseling. But once they look at resources outside of the school and getting, for the younger kids, play therapy, age appropriate counseling.
They will likely get tools at school, but not really the therapy that's needed.
So we do the play therapy for the younger kids and we would do the talk therapy for the older kids. So absolutely. So that would be what I would.
Those are good ones. Well, one book that I really love using with it's great for little ones. The author is Julia Cook, and she is just such a wonderful author for issues that counselors deal with. It's called Wilma Jean, the Worry Machine, and it's just really cute. I know, it's just so cute. And it just really speaks to kids. So that's my book pick. What about yours?
I picked When Burly Worried, and I think it's a really popular book. Kevin Hankey wrote it, so it's very well known. But it's just that, you know, helping kids to move from point A to point B too. You know, and I think that's, I don't know, I like the way his parents helped him to get over some of that.
I love When Burly Worried. Such a good book. My book, it's probably for a little bit older audience. It's called The 10 Best Ever Management Techniques, and it's specifically for anxiety. The author is Margaret Warburg, and basically she talks about breathing techniques, mindful awareness, and that positive self-talk that we just talked about not too long ago. It's a really good resource.
Well, if you are looking for these resources or more, please stop by and visit us online at www.counselordynamite.com, where you can find a wealth of resources, particularly here in the Austin area. We hope you will visit us. And if you're not in the Austin area, please do visit us. And also check your local Chamber of Commerce or local schools for additional resources in your area.
If you have any questions or comments that you would like to share with us, go ahead and feel free to post them on our Counselor Dynamite webpage. We will try to get back with you within a timely manner to answer your questions and to give you some feedback on your comments.
And again, we're so thankful that you're able to join us for this month's show. We hope you will join us again next month, where we will be talking about transitioning back to school from the holidays, as well as empathy. We want to again encourage you to go ahead and subscribe for free to all of the Counselor Dynamite Views discussions. You can get them at www.counselordynamite.com. Also, you can follow and like us on Twitter and Facebook. Until our paths cross again, we wish you great health, happiness, joy, and peace.
The content of the Counselor Dynamite View, owned and operated by Life Menders Counseling, PLLC, is intended for general information purposes only. The information, views, and opinions expressed in this online talk show are not specific medical, financial, legal, or counseling advice. The content of this video is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent a situation or condition. Individuals with mental health concerns should consult their doctor and/or mental health care provider for professional medical advice, medications, or treatments. If you have a mental health problem, we encourage you to speak to your doctor or mental health professional immediately about your condition. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to the Counselor Dynamite View, the show hosts, or Life Menders Counseling, PLLC, whose words and/or opinions appear from or on this show.